Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining us this afternoon, we have Matthew Vega-Sanz, CEO and co-founder of Gail, as well as Daniel Lloreda, managing partner and co-founder of H20 Capital Innovation. We're here to discuss the rise of domain-specific AI in financial services and why fintech may be the proving ground for the next generation of artificial intelligence. It is great to have the both of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks, Matthew. I'm going to kick it off with you first. Give us some background on what domain-specific AI is and why financial services could be the breeding ground for the next gen of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks so much for having us. This is a topic I love and probably the most obsessed person in the world about it. What happens with the incumbent AIs, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, as incredible technologies as they were trained essentially scraping all the free information off the internet, which is really great if you need something like American history, that if you get one little minute detail wrong on, it's not that big a deal. What happens is when you're playing in an industry as nuanced and complicated like financial services, insurance, banking, finance, you want to make sure that data and that AI is trained to be able to manage those nuances. God forbid the AI is talking somebody through their chemo coverages and makes a mistake. And so you really want to make sure that AI is trained to be able to manage that. But you also want to make sure that the data is segmented in a particular way, stored in a particular way. There's certain levels of compliance, and a lot of the generic AIs aren't built to do that. And so we focus on domain-specific AI, and you're seeing a lot of these types of AIs pop up, not just with financial services businesses like Gail, but in medical, legal, and a lot of other areas as well. And I think it's going to be a big trend you see going forward.
And Daniel, your team at H20, you've made an investment into Gail's funding here. Explain to us what the rationale was behind that and how it stands up from other AI startups within the landscape that is pretty broad at this point.
Jill, at the end, at H20, we believe in founders and we believe in people. We're here to back category-defining founders building huge companies. And Matthew and Michael, we've been following for many years. We were not investors in Lula, which was a previous startup, but once we had the opportunity to invest in this new coin, in Gail, we just jumped ship. We've seen them execute. We've seen how hungry these founders are, the types of teams they're building, and ultimately tying it to the vertical domain or specific. Matthew and Michael have deep domain expertise in insurance and in financial services. So leveraging their know-how, their access in the industry, and their unfair advantage with data and workflows will definitely set them out in this highly competitive space.
Yeah. And Matthew, you're also looking as Miami as perhaps the next Silicon Valley East capital, if you will, as it relates to AI. What's the backdrop specifically with Miami that makes it so attractive when you think about it within the broader AI landscape?
I think one of the things is we always talk about there's two ways of funding that a business can get. One is from investors, one's from the customers. I think if you can get the capital from investors here, definitely. You have the best fintech investor in Steve McLaughlin that's out here. You have four of the top 11 Midas list VCs here as well. You have growth funds like Founders Fund, Coastline, SoftBank. That presence is here. But I think more importantly, because Miami is such an international city, you have direct flights to places all over the world. And so not only do you have access to customers here in the United States, but you have direct flights all the way in Latin America, Europe, and whatnot. And I think that's really rare in other parts of the country. It's tough to go from San Francisco directly to London on one quick flight or to Colombia. It's not tough to do here in Miami. And so because of that, you have access to a lot more customers, a lot more deals, and we're seeing the fruits of that. This will be the week that we come out of stealth mode, and we've already been fortunate enough to have a couple multi-million-dollar contracts signed. And it's because of our central location here in Miami. I can get on a quick flight to Latin America. I can get on a quick flight to New York and go close deals where it might be a little bit more complicated to do that elsewhere. And because of that, we didn't raise the biggest round of capital. There's competitors of ours that are raising far bigger rounds, and yet we're probably outperforming them in terms of usage, revenue, and all of that because we've been able to grow much quicker through the size of some of these contracts, as opposed to others who have had to purely rely on just venture capital dollars to fuel growth.
Yeah, and Daniel, it's interesting because you make that point as well in your notes that it's the convergence of global talent that you're seeing in Miami. We just had the showdown in late January for global alts, and it felt as if the center of the world was in Miami, whether you're thinking about new startups, or whether you're in the digital asset space or traditional players within the VC space. It seems as if that, talent is converging there, not only because of its central location, but because it feels as if it's reinvigorating itself into what's becoming a very ambitious financial services hub.
And I couldn't agree more. I was pretty much born in Miami. I've been there all my life, and maybe 15 years ago, Brickell Avenue looked like a farmland. Now it just looks like New York City. And seeing that transformation of a city where people from New York, from California, from Latin America have moved after the pandemic, that transformation, that retention of talent, we're just so bullish, and we're betting over the next 10 years, it'll be even stronger. For us as a VC fund, there's less competition than in San Francisco or than in New York. So we see it as an emerging city. And then you have, very favorable tax climate, no state tax. You have favorable weather conditions. You have nice living conditions that just attracts and brings, a magnet of talent that are building and disrupting.
I
So
would
let's
also add quickly one thing, it's the local government. When you have the mayor of Miami tweeting about how welcoming they are to have people here and talking about how they'll help you find workspace. And we have a couple of people here that we're trying to convince to come move to Miami. And some of the local government folks have told us, hey, tell them to check out XYZ building. They can probably get a good deal. Like, I don't know of another city that has a local government vouching for companies like that. And so Miami's just really a special place, not only because of talent and capital, but also the resourcing that local government officials are willing to provide.
Yeah, your mayor was one of the first and most progressive in terms of digital asset adoption. And, Miami certainly has built itself around there as well. But when you look a little bit longer term, Daniel, for what's next for domain specific AI, because in fairness, AI, it's just moving so quick when it comes to startups or even legacy companies in terms of how the landscape is evolving so quickly. What's the case for domain specific AI as a longer term investment? How do you see it evolving?
We're betting on deep domain expertise. We want to help founders build those workflows that are so deep and innate into the day-to-day operation that makes the switching cost so high for these companies, and ultimately creating these efficiencies that are just so robust that ultimately pay, handfuls of, the average contract values. And particularly in the case of Gail, we're making a push for having access to this proprietary data, having access to this team's domain expertise, and just helping these product officers or these, heads of transformation at top insurance companies and banks ultimately fall in love with their solution and never switch to another one.
So, Matthew, this is more about depth over breadth as an example. So it won't be publicly available like other generative AI platforms as an example. What makes it unique? What's the investment case for an insurance company to leverage Gail's technology?
There's this funny phrase in not just insurance, but banking, finance, and across the whole sector. And what happens is a lot of these folks consider themselves professional Google searchers. And that's perfectly fine if you're helping somebody buy a pair of shoes online. But when you're asking your insurance broker about what types of coverages should they get, or if you're asking your financial advisor, hey, can you walk me through Basel III type compliance? You really don't want them, you really don't want to risk them getting information from a random forum on Quora. You want to be able to make sure that the information they're getting has been vetted, it's safe, it's compliant, it's accurate. And so the big case for us is, hey, every time one of your employees searches something up on Google, that opens you up to a world of liability because you don't actually know how vetted that tool is. And if you do find a vetted tool, you kind of have to go out of your way to look through the source and make sure it's legitimate. With us, it's the same experience as ChatGPT, super simple, super quick to get ready, but now you're getting information from highly vetted sources. And so that's one of the big things that we talk about. It's not just convenient access to high quality industry specific information, but it's also from a compliance perspective, it takes a lot of liabilities off the legal teams, the procurement teams, and whatnot of these financial institutions. And so I'd say that's one of the big selling points that we have.
So, for example, if we were to ask a specific question around insurance in Florida, why there are challenges that are associated with risk modeling and why the cost has gone higher due to climate and so forth, it'll be able to narrow down more compliant specific answers for the person that's looking to understand the situation better versus going to something that's open outsource as an example and getting more of a random broader answer.
Absolutely. And not only will it be able to give you a high quality answer, but let's say there's a law or some sort of statute that has to be mentioned, it'll give you down to the exact statute what that it's referencing, and it'll cite it so in case you want to go back and take a look. The other thing that we can do too is we can create personas. And so let's say you're working at let's say Danny's a great example. Let's say Danny doesn't have access to a venture analyst for whatever reason. Maybe they're out on vacation and he wants to talk to an AI that can take on the persona of a venture associate. Danny can now build a venture associate and a venture associate persona and can engage with it and have a high quality conversation. Same thing with folks on the insurance side. Let's say you don't have a compliance officer. Gail will give you the compliance officer that can review your messages, review your documents, and if it sees something that isn't compliant, it'll tell you why. And again, it'll be able to source the exact statute, the exact law that would as to why it's giving that answer.
So, Daniel, this is a great case then for smaller businesses as well, because the cost of compliance, whether it's in-house or external, can be quite daunting when you're trying to figure out, where you want to allocate resources to. And a lot of times, the compliance function and so forth can be associated with a cost versus a revenue stream. So this can, in another way, help to balance out those resources that are not quite as accessible for smaller businesses.
Definitely. For $500 a month, which is what I believe Gail is currently pricing at for the small and medium-sized businesses, you could have a full-time analyst, not only from the compliance side, which is more of a, let's say, cost driver, but also on the revenue driver. I've seen how Gail's conversational voice AI agents can help streamline debt collection and claim management and ultimately eliminate, humans in a call center. And let's say in Latin America, where there's actually, foot traffic, debt collectors, they're eliminating the need for having motorcycles out on the road. And ultimately for the banking institution, that's just going directly down to the bottom line on EBITDA improvement. And it creates very attractive for these, institutions on an ROI basis.
Right. And you're still going to see a human in the loop, though. I mean, from a compliance perspective, from a data governance perspective, you are still going to have a human in the loop at the end of the day. It's not completely eliminating it.
It depends on the use case, but yeah, you will have a human that's driving it. And so we always say, instead of having, for instance, we work with one big bank, they use this for debt collection. They're doing probably 3 to 4 million phone calls a day. And so they would have needed probably a workforce of 40,000 people. Now they have a team of a handful of people. And so there's still a human in the loop. It's just not as big of a team.
Where else, and to wrap up here, Matthew, what else do you see, what other industries could leverage this to the same extent that financial services and insurance are?
I think the medical industry, I think is the one that comes top to mind. I think medical industry is seeing something very similar to what's going on in the financial services, insurance especially. Margins are compressing. They've been operating in the red the last couple of years. Banking sector isn't as bad as insurance, but you're still seeing margin compression. I think you're seeing a lot of similar trends on the medical side of things. And so if I had to pick one other industry ripe for domain-specific AI, the medical industry would be it.
All right. I appreciate both of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Jill.
you for the time. Have a good one.